Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devin Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejan Sarowick. Sejan?
Hey, Devin, I take issue with something that you said just before you started recording. You do this to me a lot where you just drop a bomb on me and then go.
I
And your exact phrase was, let's talk about the nut job, something I don't think anybody's ever done before. I don't know, man. A lot of people on the internet sure like to talk about the nut job.
I don't know. Okay, then revision 1. Let's talk about the Nut Job 2,
Yeah.
Nutty by Nature.
Now that's one I
Something no
think
one's
nobody
ever
ever
done
talks about.
before.
Yeah. Oh man. There was one thing I was going to check about the Nut Job 2 before we got too deep into this, and as I said, I was having a hell of a time finding the Nut Job 2 on like fucking IMDb. I lost it in an
Okay, well,
attempt
you
to
go look
in an
for it.
attempt to find protect your nuts.
Okay, I will. I can do some background as to what we're doing and why we're talking about the Nut Job 2, Nutty by Nature, which that's going to be the last time I use the full title. It will be referred to as the Nut Job 2, or by its preferred title in 1996, NJ2. That doesn't star Will Smith, though. So, Nut Job 2, that's what we're going to call it. And we're talking about the Nut Job 2 for one very simple reason, ladies and gentlemen. And that is, it's Brendan Fraser History Month. It's still trucking. The world is doing what it's doing, but we're still taking the time to celebrate the work of Brendan Fraser.
Right.
And what most people may not know is that Brendan Fraser is second billed in The Nut Job, original 2014 release.
And you'd be forgiven for not knowing that for a lot of reasons, not least of which because he's not really that big of a character in that movie.
He's kind of a plot point. He's a prop in a lot of ways.
I feel like in the original script for the Nut Job, in the original concept for the Nut Job, that character probably had a lot more going on. And we'll talk about that a little bit more because we will have to do a rundown of the first one because it's so important you understand the first movie in order to understand the second.
Is it?
Can you hear my eyes rolling, Devin?
Yes, I can. I wanted to make sure. I was actually busy checking my levels to see that wasn't like interference. Your
Yeah, right.
eye roll. Jeez. I need to turn down your gain, mister, because I feel like you're just going to be rolling your eyes this whole episode. But yes, Brendan Fraser portrays squirrel hero Grayson in The Nut Job, and for some reason, Grayson does not return in Nut Job 2.
Well, I got some theories about that. And I think that the best way to talk about his character is to point out that what Devin just called him, Squirrel Hero Grayson, that's not like there was no commas in there. That is a character name that he essentially has. like they refer to him as the hero squirrel in the movie. Oh, he's the hero squirrel. like that is
It's Grayson, the hero of the park.
I got a real issue with the inconsistent nature in which people are referred to and characters are portrayed in both movies, but in the first movie in particular, because you're introduced to the world. And that is the main character, the hero of your movie, played by one Will Arnett, beautifully, I might add. I've got no issue with, honestly, any of the acting in any of these movies. Like, I want to put that on the table right now. Acting is not my concern with these films. But anyway, his name is Surly. And guess what his biggest character trait is?
He's
right?
purple as a bit of a visual pun.
Yeah.
Because the purple. Do you know the term purple squirrel? Is that a term that you've ever come up with in your life?
I've come against it colloquially because I've been to like fucking like state fairs and shit, but like it isn't one that I use on a regular basis.
Yeah, no, I don't use the phrase either. So if you're unfamiliar with the purple squirrel, it is someone who is perfect for the job. They're the purple squirrel. I don't know why.
I don't know where it comes from either. But yeah, so you get characters like Surly the squirrel, right? And he is quite surly. You have what is referred to in the beginning of the script as the hero squirrel, and then we learn his name, right? We have what is Andy's name
Andy.
before we
She's just Andy.
No, I thought there was a different name for her as well. There was like there's the Raccoon is just referred to as Mr. Raccoon the whole time.
No, there's no Mr. It's just Raccoon.
Right, right. So some of them have names like Andy. Some of them have names like Surly, in which you're like, oh, that's his character trait. That's why he's named that, like one of the fucking seven dwarfs. And then you have Raccoon, who is just called Raccoon because he is a raccoon. There's no consistency to the ways in which people refer to each other in this world. I kind of wish, I gotta say, I kind of wish they went full Animal Farm on it and everybody was just referred to as like Raccoon and Purple Squirrel and Red Squirrel. That's what it is, Red. There's a couple of times in which she is referred to as Red because she is a red squirrel. But anyway, there's a whole bunch of weird shit that goes on in just the naming convention, and that is pretty emblematic of what goes on in the rest of the script. Sometimes it's a pretty straightforward heist film. Other times it's like a fucking children's comedy that is like Dick and Fart, and which doesn't quite fit. Sometimes and I can't even begin to tell you how you get from this one to the second one.
Well, I mean, let's first of all let's look at this in the pantheon of the Fraser-less sequels that we have already looked at for 2020, and that is, you have Journey to the Center Earth to Journey to the Mysterious Island, where they want you to forget that Brendan Fraser's character exists in the world, but they don't want you to forget that the first movie happened.
Right, exactly. That's key. That's important.
That's
and then
very
in the second
important.
one, then in the second one,
they very much wanted you to know that Brendan Fraser's not here, to its detriment. But also that first movie, kind of friggin' important to the narrative of what's happening in George of the Jungle 2.
Then we get to the relationship between Nut Job and Nutty by Nature. I'm never gonna not call it Nutty by Nature, because it is just a different film, Devin. Like, it is just a different film that for some reason they slapped Nut Job 2 in the beginning of.
Yeah, it's
not only is Brendan Fraser's character not around, he's not really important, because, to be fair, he wasn't hugely important to the plot of the first one. So, like, once they get away from the whole heist aspect, which is completely gone in the second one, so there's really no Nut Job in Nut Job 2, which, hey, I'm the first person to talk about how great Hangover 3 is because there's no hangover, so, like, I won't hold it to that. But let's talk about the fact that, like, you laid out a comedic concept in the first movie, you gotta at least stick to it in the second one. You can't throw it out the window yet. At least in the Hangover 3, there's still a skeleton of what was there in Hangover 1 and 2, right? But in the Nut Job 2, Nutty by Nature, is gone. Is just gone. It's out the window. This is a different world. This is a different world. As far as I'm concerned, this is a different universe in which Brendan Fraser's character never existed.
And I wrote that in my notes. I wrote in my notes, do these animals just exist in Anytown, USA? Mm-hmm. And we're seeing this situation because...
That's disappointing to think that it would be Anytown, USA, because I actually really like the setting of the first one. One of my biggest issues with the first one is that Oakton, the name of the city, it is also the 1940s. Did you know that? Like,
yes,
I didn't think about it. I didn't think about it until I read it, and I was like, oh yeah, obviously it's like the 1940s. It just didn't occur to me that it was a period piece. But like, that is kind of detrimental to like the whole setup of that world, right? Like, Oakton is an important part of this world because like Oakton is this little slice of life 1940s in which these gangsters exist and all this other silly shit can happen, right? Yeah, in the second one, again, thrown out the window. So like, it's kind of disappointing to think that, oh, this could just be anywhere, because that wasn't the point in the first one.
So my question, what I need to confirm with you is the park named in the first film? Because yes. They do name it Liberty Park in the first movie. Yeah, I did not remember that at all, and I didn't have the chance to go back before we did it.
It's not nearly as, again, plot essential that you know the park's name, because they just refer to it as the park. For the park, I think, is the actual
for the park. Yeah,
like the like culty like chant that the animals have. But they do name it Liberty Park. Like, you do see signage and things like that.
Okay, but it's just in like signage, right? Because they specifically refer to it as Liberty Park by name in Nut Job 2, and I'm like, I feel like I missed that because
they need to set up a big joke, dude. They need to set up Lie Park, all of that fucking setup just for that fucking visual gag at the end when the lights go out.
Yeah, jeez. Oakton, right? Let's talk about Oakton and the fact that in the first movie, I loved the branding. I love that Oakton is everywhere, down to the playing card backpack that Andy wears.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're Oakton playing cards, and
Mhm.
and it really does help to build this world.
It's a page out of Pixar's book, and I think that that's something that we're going to notice a lot as we talk about both of these movies, specifically the first one, because as for like it does the better job in all accounts. But world building, like the ways in which it builds a world, is very much like not stolen from Pixar, but very much in that vein, right? Whereas you're mentioning things are labeled, you're seeing things are not just like off-brand coffee, like it's Oakton coffee, right? Like you see that kind of stuff. The whole like world of just the nut shop alone is like amazingly well detailed, really. Maybe not necessarily in the animation itself, but in concept.
Yeah, it's a fully realized shop, which
Hmm.
is actually an issue that I have with the first movie because they bought this deprecated nut shop because it was next door to the bank,
Right.
and the nut shop is still like furnished and it has everything going on in it, to the part that they can have the cart that they use for surveillance in the first scene. And it's very strange because you wouldn't think that a shop that like went under, even though the reason it goes under based upon the setting is probably the war effort and everything like that,
Yep. Yeah.
why would it still have everything in it? Why would it still have such like an inventory?
I don't know, but that is something that comes back in two, because once again the nut shop goes under, and once again everything is left there, and that is where it becomes the safe haven for these animals in the opening of that movie, which I noticed it more in two than I even thought about in one, was this idea that like they just left the nuts, they just left all the nuts behind.
They not just in the first movie, the basement has like a couple of bags of nuts.
Hmm.
And they do call it Nutlantis, which is strange considering the mysterious island. They also went to Nut Atlantis.
And they went to Nutlantis too. I
Um,
mean, man, if they could have called it Nutlantis, they would have gone for that joke in
oh,
a
they
second.
definitely would have. Like if Luis Guzman walks into a pillar and he's like, "Oh, they should call this Nutlantis."
Right in the Nutlantis.
Stick my dick in a mashed potatoes.
Oh my god.
Sorry, I don't. There's a lot of movies in our heads, and the nut job is the one we're talking about today. It just doesn't make sense that stock because nuts keep and you could sell them off, right? Like, I have to go bankrupt, but people will buy nuts because the beauty of the nut is it's sort of
I mean, in the
recession
first one,
proof.
I'm very willing to, in this kids movie that doesn't need nor deserve I'm willing to say that they muscled out whoever actually owned it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
It's like I think that's your right off answer for that, is that it didn't actually technically quote unquote go under, that they muscled out whoever owned it so that they could be in the building.
And I would believe that if not for the way that the line is delivered of "we got it for a song." I guess that's it. Right? But for a song, I feel like that you put up capital, knowing that you'd get your investment back. You know what's really disappointing about the nut shop in the first movie? Established in 1862. So, like, it was there for a while before it folded. It makes me sad. And then, like, one step beyond, in Nut Job 2, it's not even called Maury's Nut Shop anymore. It's Nibbler's Nut Shop, which also fed into my idea that, like,
It's a different world.
This is a different universe.
I mean, like, I feel like so much of it has to be. So the first movie is conceptualized as a heist film, but the whole thing is that it's animals trying to steal nuts from this nut shop, right? Now, it's overlaid over actually a very interesting and very well thought out subplot of these dudes who have taken over the nut shop because they're using it as a front so that they can rob the bank next door. So you see a heist film on top of a heist film, and it leads to a lot of really good like double.
Yeah, it's a dual
plot line
narrative
stuff.
that's
Yeah,
really,
and-
really
and-
cool.
And you know, down to the point where the finale of the movie, we get to see the main protagonist of both jobs and choose two different ways of going about their life. You know, at the end of it, we see Surly, being the true hero of our movie, do the right thing and give up on the score in order to save his friends. Whereas at the end of the other plot, we see the dude that's been running the show there choose the job over any type of relationship he has, right? And we're supposed to see the two different go in two different directions, and how one loses all and one gains everything, right? Like that's like it is for a it is a simple tactic and trope, but that is what the first movie is through and through. Is like, let's take just a bunch of simple ideas and just put them together and get them on screen. And you see that in the writing, you see that in the story, you see that in the characters, you see that in the animation. Like the first one, I don't want to say it's hobbled together because it's clearly not. It's just there's a lot of people that are probably kind of just taking their first dip in the water, shall we say.
But I think that's to that movie's it's a boon to that film. I think that
Yeah,
film,
for sure.
keeping it simple, considering I'm fairly certain it was the first like animated feature from Red Rover, the Korean animation studio.
I think so, yep.
Yeah, to work simply like that and to not try to overextend was really makes that film quite enjoyable. I really love the nut job in a way that I was I know that the first time I watched it, I'm like, this was a really good film. This was better than I expected it to be. And then watching it again today, I was like, yeah, like, and I know why. I see what about this film actually spoke to me. So it passes the second viewing test, and it's really, really good. And even the Grayson character, he's important to the story, and Brendan Fraser is important to play that role, because it is borrowing heavily on the baggage that his voice and performance brings to a role. Am I wrong in that belief? I mean,
I think that Brendan Fraser playing that role, they luck out because that character becomes much more important to me because it's him. Other than that, I mean, like that character is just kind of weird and useless to me. Because let's be honest, the entire time you're expecting that character, not that you're expecting the character in this movie, but the character that he plays, the hero squirrel that is always saving the day and makes Surly kind of look bad in the beginning of the movie. You have to assume by the end of this movie the turnaround is going to be he's actually been the villain this whole time, right? And they do that turnaround with a different character, right? So when it doesn't happen to him, you kind of start to wonder like what the point of him was the whole time. Like if you're not building him up to ever be a true antagonist to your protagonist, then why is he there? Because he doesn't serve any other real role. He never really becomes Surly's friend. I mean, like we believe that they become partners-ish by the end of that movie, but only because, as I said, Brendan Fraser just brings a lot of character to a character that's otherwise meaningless to me.
yeah, I definitely believe that. I mean, there's a moment where he defends Surly, and you're hoping that what Grayson is a symbol. He is what Batman was trying to be in the Nolan trilogy, and he accomplishes it, but he accomplishes it for a nefarious reason. He accomplishes it because Raccoon, who is, spoilers, the real villain of the piece, needs him because if he has Grayson, who he just says is a hero and everyone believes that, then that's the bread and circus. So he can get away with, well, it's the circus because the bread is the other thing. But Raccoon's whole thing is that I can control this park by controlling the food supply. That's my job.
But it's key that Grayson is not like Raccoon's like right-hand man, right?
Yes.
Like he's an unknowing pawn in this.
Right. And that's very important. Yeah.
And well, it's important to the character, but it takes away from his importance in the rest of the story. It really undercuts what that character could be because he's basically just an unwilling participant in this other person's ploy. And so like but he's not incompetent. That's the other thing, right? He doesn't swing far enough in the other direction of being useless. He is actually quite useful in many moments in the movie. So I never quite know how to feel about him because on the one hand, he's really kind of put in this weird position without his asking to, and on the other hand, he does kind of deserve it in a lot of ways. Like some of the stuff he does, right? Like so it puts me as a viewer in a really weird spot that I just don't necessarily need to be in this kids movie, this inconsequential kids film, you know?
Not that we need to examine that first movie deeper, but to do that, I'm reminded of Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs as I hear you talk about that, and Baby Brent.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, who is the antagonist of the main guy. I can't think of his name right now. the inventor
Mhm.
of the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs machine,
Yeah.
and how they are like sort of antagonistic to each other that whole time, and it just doesn't take the time to build Grayson up as that. However, because of the disdain that we see towards Surly from Raccoon, I guess I filled in some blanks in the background because I've seen a film before. And the reason why Raccoon has chosen another squirrel to champion as the hero and tried to like cast aspersions upon Surly is because Surly has the potential to be what Grayson already is, and that
Right.
would threaten Raccoon's power.
For sure. And here's how I'll put it. I think that that is awesomely complex, and the rest of this movie never gets that complex. And so, like, I feel like part of that is, again, you have an actor like Brendan Fraser, an Oscar-nominated actor like Brendan Fraser coming in and playing this role, and it creates a an amount of like it builds up that character in a way that by the end of the movie you realize you shouldn't have. And like in a more complex environment, I'd be okay with that. But the rest of this movie doesn't ever deserve that, right? From this character. It's just it's a weird amount of time and effort and thought put into that character by both the creators of this film and the audience of this film, for it to go nowhere, because it really does go nowhere by the end of this movie.
Right, and that's the only detriment that I will agree is there, because I think that once they got Brendan Fraser, they're like, we can use the fact that it's him, an Oscar-nominated actor who people think of as the hero of The Mummy and the hero of all these other things, and we can try to get one over on the audience where they're expecting this guy to live up to it because it is this voice that they know. Now, it's parents. It's every kids movie is made for two audiences, the kid and the parent. I think it's so that the parent is sitting there and they get invested a little bit, and then they're like, "Oh, damn, I got hoodwinked by
Yeah,
Raccoon's plan."
and like I said, if I felt like it deserved that, that's a feeling I'm fine walking away from a movie with, but I don't always feel a movie earns that right to play that trick on me, right? And I don't think this movie did. The only other name that we should drop before we start getting into what goes on in the second movie, because we've talked about this, there is this heist film. They lo and behold, they pull it off by the end of it, and a lot of really good tropey heist stuff happens throughout it, including turnabouts and all that. But we should mention that the first film is written and directed by first-time writer and director for a major motion picture. His name is Peter Lepaniotis. I think I said that right.
Lebanon, yeah, Lebanese.
Yeah, and the only reason I mention that is because this was his baby. Surly Squirrel was a short that he created 6 years previously. I'm thinking
2005.
So about
11.
10 years previously.
Yeah, 2014. So 9 years. Yeah,
So
math.
there's yeah, so this is a thing that like is important to him. Like, it's his first time out, and as I mentioned earlier, like, you can kind of tell there's a lot of like first time stuff going on. But does a fine job, like, as like a writer and director for an animated movie. Not an easy task in any stretch, never mind it being your first. And the big reason I mention that is because he is nowhere near the second movie.
Right. He is. The second movie is obviously made because the first movie makes 3 times its budget. It is a worldwide like success.
Yeah. It is made pretty cheaply for an animated movie in the 2000s. What is it, the starting budget? Like 50 million?
$43 million is what
million.
People is reported.
Yes, yeah, I'm seeing a 42 to 43 on Mojo. Yeah, so like it starts out in already a sticky place, because it's only going out there with $42 million behind it, which for an animated movie, again, in the mid 2000s is actually 2010s, right? Yeah, it's oof.
Yeah, 2014. Yeah. So looking at that, isn't that the year that Frozen comes out? Like to hold up a completely crazy comparison, but I think so, right? Like, is that, or is Frozen later?
Let's check it out.
So,
Frozen is actually the year before.
Okay,
2013.
So Frozen comes out. Frozen comes out 2013. Frozen is still in theaters when this comes out in January of 2014.
Mm-hmm.
So just think of, I mean, and granted, you're comparing anything to Disney, which is already, you're kind of doing a disservice to the one that's not Disney, because they literally have all the money in the world
Yeah.
to create
But
their things. But
as we mentioned, Red Rover, their first time out as they're South Korean, right?
yes, they are.
Yeah, so they're the South Korean animation house for this movie, and it is at the time, as much as I was saying that the budget was not huge, it is actually still the most expensive South Korean animated film ever made at that point. I don't know if it's been top since then, but at that time, it was being touted as very important to South Korea because it was hugely expensive for them to produce this movie, and lucky for them, it ends up making a ton of money in its 4 or 5 week run. Like, it's not out very long.
Right, again, because it's up against Frozen. So you need to consider that, because Frozen was in theaters for like ever, right? Like,
Yes,
and,
famously.
yeah,
It was around for 2 to 3 months in theaters, whereas a film like this was lucky to get like 6 weeks. So there's a lot going on in this first movie. There's a lot going on behind the scenes of this first movie. It hits kind of tepidly, I would say, to be nice. It does not get the highest of praise from a lot of people, but I'll be honest, I've never met anybody that saw it that like hated it. I mean, with me in there, like I don't despise this movie by any stretch.
no, and
I'd
like,
watch it on a Sunday afternoon if it was on, right?
there's a reason why a Nut Job 2 is announced, because it's there. The audience is there for a sequel. Unfortunately, we get the sequel that we get.
So, Nut Job 2, as I've already mentioned, not a lick of a heist to be seen. So, like, already lost, like, the heart of your first movie. Also, they cut down the main characters down to really only four returning main characters, right? Five. I forgot Buddy, but the only reason I forgot Buddy is because he doesn't have any speaking lines. Well, I guess spoiler alert, he does have one speaking line, the emotional one speaking line from your silent character in the first movie.
Friend.
Yeah.
Which
yeah,
is weird. Like, he delivers it so weird.
Yeah, well, yeah, right? Because it's almost like he doesn't know how to speak, which is something to leave as a mystery in the first movie. And then in the second movie, they get a little bit into the background of him and him and Surly, and I don't understand why he wouldn't know how to talk.
And it's one of those things where I was curious about that in the first film, where, like, well, he's a rat. Like, very obviously, Buddy is a rat, and we meet other rats, and they're also nonverbal. And there's plenty of other nonverbal animals, like pigeons and the cardinal that works for the raccoon. Like, we see nonverbal creatures, but
that cardinal was a great character. I love that character.
The unkillable cardinal? That cardinal made a deal with the goddamn devil.
Until they killed that cardinal, and it was upsetting.
It comes back again.
Does it?
Yeah, did you not watch to the end credits of the Nut Job?
Oh, I forgot about the after credit scene. No, I have seen the after credit scene. I just didn't rewatch it today. Yes, where you see the guys in the water eventually, right? But do you also see the cardinal?
You see the raccoon. He's sitting on a buoy, and
right.
the cardinal shows up, and he's like, "Wow, old friend!" And the cardinal pecks him on the head and goes to leave, and he's like, "No, don't go!" And then he flies away, and then sharks start circling the buoy. And you're just like, oh, okay, I guess that cardinal's the devil. That cardinal's just the devil.
I forgot that he got out of the cat show, yeah.
Yeah, right,
oh,
which
man.
is, you're right, because he gets eaten by cats. He gets hit by a bus. He gets a freaking door, a metal door dropped on him.
And,
That cardinal's evil, but he's also nonverbal. So
this is interesting enough to make me want to go back and watch that first movie again.
That's fine.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So the second one comes around. We get Buddy, we get Surly, we get Andy, we get Princess, right? That's her name?
Precious, the pug played by Maya Rudolph. Checking the name. Oh, and Katherine Heigl is Andy. I don't think we gave that one either. Like, it's a legit cast in this movie.
Both of them get pretty legit casting jobs. The second one actually adds a really interesting pull for a very weird character. We'll talk about that when we get to it because it's not revealed until like halfway through the movie. But But yeah, so we end up in the second movie. Things have kind of settled down. It's only 9 months later. It's not even supposed to be a year later in the second film. Although I think in real time it's been like 3 years, right?
It's
Um,
yeah, it's 2014 to 2017. So yeah, 3 years in the real world, 9 months in the movie because it's the winter before they talk
mhm.
about the nut shop closing, and also I need to talk about one thing, and that's the end of the first movie, The Nut Job.
Yeah,
Spoilers for The Nut Job. Surly is like, I will be the unsung hidden hero of this park.
right.
I will. I understand that like you need the symbol of Grayson. I don't need the praise and applause, but I will make sure that this park is taken care of. And it's this like kind of cool message where like you just need to do what's right. You shouldn't do it for like the praise.
Right.
And then the second movie opens with him basically king of the park animals.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The second movie does everything it can to basically just ignore any of the lessons learned or the development or anything from the first. It is. It's not even a retell. It's like often sequels, especially children's sequels, be called out for basically retelling the same story again, and so you feel like the lessons learned are forgotten and then relearned. It's not even that. It's like the lessons that were learned in the last movie are not only forgotten, but also not even the point of this one. Like it's such a weird idea that like in the concept and the lesson for Surly in the first movie is to learn to not be selfish, right? And
Yes,
that's the story he's supposed
that's
to
it.
learn.
Yeah.
But in the second one, he's not selfish. He's just a dick in a different way. So like he learned to not be a dick, and then like that was gone because now he's still a dick, but for all in all the other different ways that he wasn't a dick in the first one. So again, it's like he's a completely different character essentially.
Is he a dick? Like, I take real umbrage. So, like, we open, and the central conflict
In the first or
is
the second one?
the second movie. The second movie.
Okay.
We open,
Okay.
and we're done with the first movie unless it organically happens. From this point now, it's all nutty by nature. Are you down with OPP? I couldn't make that nut related.
Other people.
Other people's peanuts.
Oh, okay.
What did you think it was?
I said pecans.
Oh, pecans. Yeah, so the central like conflict in the second movie is Surly feels like he's made it. Look how far he's come, my baby. He has the nut shop. There's enough food for everyone in the park's lifetime, and like that's good enough. That's enough for him. That's all he
and
needs.
he is giving it away. He's not quote unquote scrolling it away. Like he is straight up sharing it. There are parties every night in the nut shop that he throws for everybody to come and eat.
Right. And then on the other end of it, you have Andy, who is, we need to work hard in order to survive. We can't just take the gift of the nut shop because we're not living our lives the way we're supposed to. We're wild animals. And
Right.
it's so strange because then inevitably the nut shop explodes
Inevitably, yeah.
like you do in a movie like this. I don't know. And a step further than that, and he goes, all right, but I've been taking care of everybody. I like taking care of everybody. You go sit in the park and I will go get us food from out in the city. And Andy's like, you're taking a shortcut. You're doing this the easy way. There ain't nothing easy about what he does when he goes to forage for food in the city.
Right.
Because he goes to a restaurant and tries to steal from a restaurant. Has to be a Ratatouille reference, right? Them going to a French restaurant and trying to steal food. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all I could think.
The fact that they didn't lean into it is actually is disappointing.
Yeah.
But yes.
I mean, the first movie I think would have. The second movie, no, they didn't do that. Because it's a montage. It's like a quick montage of the fact that it's going to be difficult for him to get food. They try to steal popcorn from outside of a movie theater, but pigeons eat it all. And then they steal a single donut from a donut shop and are chased by all of the cops in Oakton.
But they're not chasing them, right? Am I wrong about that? They think they are. Or are they actually just chasing them with that donut under the tire that entire time?
I think they just, like, someone stole a donut, and that makes all the cops go crazy.
Yeah, they go fucking nuts. So like without actually looking for the donut, every cop in Oakton is now running all over the streets, and it causes them to actually destroy the precious donut they were trying to find. Yeah, that's really weird. I think that we'd be remiss here if we didn't also point out how much of the second one feels like it's just over the hedge.
Oh, the second one, oh, well, it's going to become another movie later. But yes, it is very over the hedge, right down to the fact that an exterminator becomes one of the main antagonists.
Right.
Though Peter Stormare, I will say, always one of my favorite sequel ad characters.
Yeah.
John Wick 2 with the fucking pencil. That guy's
Doesn't he
great.
show up in one of the Taken sequels as well? Am I wrong about that?
Yes, he does.
Yeah,
He shows up as the sequel a bunch.
Yeah.
And I love him. I love him when he does it. So him showing up as the exterminator, 2 thumbs up. But for her to be like, you're trying to take the easy road, like, I don't understand why Andy, I mean, I do. You said something during this episode that made me realize why Andy believes that hard work is the way of the people. It's because she's a red squirrel. She's a communist.
Yeah.
And I never got that until right now.
It is. I mean, the first movie is very much like a capitalism versus communism concept. In like, do you just take what you need, or do you earn what you need? Is a story. To be fair, I will say is present in both of them. But yeah.
So her thing of like, you shouldn't be staying in that nut shop because he earned that. Like Surly fought hard for that in a lot of ways. So, like, the idea that you can't reap the benefits of the work that you've done, you need to keep working, is strange. And I don't know, it that sits uncomfortably with me in the second nut job. But that's okay.
Well, so because the first one does such a beautiful job of taking that idea of you have to work for it, you have to earn it, that fight, and then seeing both the evils and the benefits of both. By the end of that movie, you learn that the people that thought they had to earn what they need to eat learned that they were being played the whole time. But the dude that also like earned really what he like the guy that stole everything realized he had to share his wealth by the end of that in order to actually like have a fulfilling life, right? So like it complicates that idea, honestly, kind of beautifully in a way that I didn't really think about until as I sit here breaking it down, right? Like that idea that communist versus capitalist attitude, that fight that's going on, learning the evils and the goods of both, all of that is at play in the first movie. In the second one, that same conversation is there, but it is so oversimplified and so smacking you in the face that it is upsetting in the second one. It doesn't sit well with me like it did in the first one.
Yeah. But again, it's okay because after this montage, this excuse for action, all of that's swept under the rug.
Yep, that means nothing.
That means nothing. It means nothing. It's just like we're going to retell the first nut job in 20 minutes so that you kind of understand the central conflict that is underlying between Surly and Andy. However, it's not going to matter. It's weird. It's very weird. And it's swept under the rug, and we're going to have a conversation right now. I mean, that's what we do. It's a podcast. By introducing what I may consider the most evil villain ever in a kid's film.
Played by? Well, let me ask which one you're talking about.
Oh, I'm talking about Mayor Muldoon.
Okay, I didn't know if you were talking about Heather Muldoon.
Heather Muldoon is basically the grand...
Elvira?
She's Elmira from Tiny Toons. She's the niece from Finding Nemo. Like, she crazy. Heather Muldoon is also evil, but that evil that is present within Heather Muldoon trickles straight down from her father.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I was going to say, played by the one and only Bobby Moynihan, the only one that could play such evil.
The only one who could represent such evil in this world is Bobby Moynihan. Yeah, he is so despicable.
Yeah, like, he's pretty terrible.
The stuff that he does when he's driving on the sidewalk and just mowing down pedestrians, like...
Yeah, and it's not even like he is, like, driven onto... He's not forced onto the sidewalk for some reason, and he just, like, deals with it. He's not freaking out. It's like it's something he does every day.
There's traffic in this 3-road town, and I can't wait in traffic. I'm the mayor. He also drives his own limo, which is crazy to
That
me.
was weird to me. Yeah,
Like,
that was weird to me.
I love driving so much. I got the biggest car possible. So we're introduced to Mayor Muldoon, and I have to ask you a serious question, Cedron, because I've seen it in too many movies for me to think that it might not be true. Do mayors hate parks? Do mayors look at a park and think, what a waste of resources?
I think that that stems from the fact that every mayor in every movie seems to hate their constituency. Like that's the thing that I even upon reading like the Ghostbusters books, I was thinking this exact same thing. I was like, who would vote for this person who clearly hates them? He said, sitting in the world he currently sits in. But he just like the ways in which he hates the park are very emblematic of the ways in which he feels pretty much about basically anything outside of himself. But yeah, it seems like mayors just look at parks as just a wasted land.
I think I don't. I'm like I really I feel like parks are important for like government grants and federal funding, right?
Well, it's government owned land, which is always fucking important. Like, I mean, maybe this is just coming from me who lives in Utah. Like, and boy, do these people love their government owned land out here. But like, there's a certain amount of pride because there is this idea that as a taxpayer you own it, right? Like the fact that it belongs to the government means it technically belongs to you, right? So there's this idea that like people just love that idea of free government owned land out here. So watching this movie in which this mayor is just like, I'm gonna like fucking capitalize on this, is just like really upsetting because I cannot imagine anybody in this town is happy with what this person is doing.
Right. It's like, but they seem happy because it's going to be an amusement park.
No,
Like,
people are idiots, don't you know?
yes. Well, according to Mayor Muldoon and also the current world in which we live. But yeah, so that's always strange to me when it's like, we're going to get rid of this land. And I mean, I worked for the litter corps in Coventry. I was the head of the litter corps. And for one summer, it was my job to clean all 47 parks in and around Coventry, Rhode Island. That's what I did.
Yeah,
and like,
I mean, I like Boy Scouts, right? Like we would go to parks every other week to do like projects, cleaning, painting, whatever, putting up fences and stuff. And like, I don't know, man, like I love like open spaces and parks. And maybe this is like the quarantine getting to me, but like, man, do I fucking miss it? So like, it hit me especially hard watching this asshole trying to take this open land. Oh man,
I just don't. I didn't get it. I didn't get where like, this is a big, I don't know. So whatever, we'll move past it. But so his idea is to destroy the park that is like, for all intents, the central feature of this town.
Mm-hmm.
And
a central park, one might say.
Yeah, but it's not New York. I don't want to confuse it. It's like where the clock tower is in Back to the Future. That'll work for people.
I mean, they call it Liberty Park. Like we're not supposed to make some connection to the idea that it is kind of Central Park-esque. Like in this town, it is kind of the only refuge of nature. Like I think that's key to both movies, is that this is supposed to be an area of the, and I think that's key to like the comedy of it, is the second they leave the park, they're not in the park anymore, right?
Yeah,
like
sure. They are in the city.
Right,
yeah.
Right. So like it is supposed to be the last refuge of anything natural around. And I think that's important.
I guess the reason that I don't want to like invoke ideas of Central Park is because it's small. Like it's not a big park. Yeah. It feels like a college quad in a lot of ways.
For sure. Yeah.
And that, because I feel like that's also important to understand. Where like,
these are things that like better movies would have leaned into, and I'm gonna hold this against the first one too. Is like better movies would have really leaned into the idea of like the park being the last bastion of like natural land for people, and the idea that the mayor in the second one wanted to bulldoze the last place of nature in the land is like almost like Lorax-esque, right? They should have really built up that idea better, because it makes the stuff when they go out into the city and have to try and survive all the funnier, right? Because there's a darkness to it, which in my book always makes things funnier, but I think that's true in all comedy, right? This idea that these animals have to learn to survive in the city because it's kind of their last hope. It is a much more interesting source of comedy for me than just these squirrels just about town, right?
Yeah, and there's no better example of that than when you meet Mr. Fang, the mouse played by Jackie Chan.
Jackie Chan is introduced to this movie as Mr. Fang.
It's
I don't know
Feng.
how upset I
It's
am or how
Feng with
happy
an
I am.
E. It's Feng with an E. I've been saying Feng this whole time. I'm sorry.
It's okay because I think it's the same pronunciation of the vowel.
No, I
But
was quoting Balls of Fury. That's why I apologized. Your name is
anything.
Feng?
Um, the yeah, so there's an army. There's no other word
There's
for
an
it.
army.
There's an army of I guess if it's Jackie Chan, one can assume it's kung fu, right? Like it is like a mix of like karate and kung fu. It's not like Bruce Lee who knew like every style of fighting.
They learned by watching the Shaolin Masters on a
So maybe
TV.
yeah,
So
they have learned kung fu, and
they
so
know
they use
kung fu, and it's
yeah.
not because they were zooped into the Matrix. Though I would have been just as okay if Keanu Reeves played that mouse.
Oh my god.
Let's be honest. But yeah, so the first time you meet them, they're just like kind of antagonists, and you don't get their backstory until there's like 15 minutes left in the movie. But if you
And
get
then
their
they become the most important characters in the whole movie.
yeah, if you had gotten that backstory the first time through, like first of all, it would have cut beautifully into Andy, Mole, and the Bruiser Groundhogs finding out that this magical other park is a golf course.
Yes.
If the mice say that, oh, we lived in a park too, and now it's gone.
Right, right. And then you cut back to them and then they discover it's the golf course. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really do like the idea of the mice. I think they're a great introduction to the concept of that. Again, I just wish the story was something other than they're going to bulldoze the park. And there's no, and it's not like they have to plan a heist to steal the plans or they have to, you know what I mean? Like what I wanted this movie to be is the story of them disrupting the building of the park, which happens in all of 10 minutes in like the middle of the movie, as opposed to the rest. Yeah.
It's first try at stopping construction in the park, victory.
They succeed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So I don't know what Andy's all on about because no, we're more than capable of doing things. We earned our basement full of nuts, Andy.
Yeah.
Like, cause look at it, chips were down. We overturned a giant bulldozer.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Cars flip like instantly in this movie. Yeah. It's the same later when the mice attack the exterminator's van.
Yeah, they just
it goes
like
flipping like a mile away.
it's like a wave of mice that just strike it, and then that thing flies away as if it doesn't
just
own
tip over though,
weigh
right?
tons.
Like you would think it's gonna tip over, but it doesn't. It flies like somebody
flies.
like drop kicked it or something. It's crazy.
The Shaolin Masters, Sijin. They studied the Shaolin Masters.
Oh,
But
man.
yeah, that's like it's real weird because those mice are a great addition to this story, and it's this nice thing of like you're refugees too. Help us defend our park, and then we can take you in. So like the fact that that happens with 15 minutes left, you never get the emotional punch of that.
Yeah, for sure.
It's very strange. You introduce another character in Frankie the Bulldog. It's long for Frank, which may be one of my favorite lines in this.
I like Frank the Bulldog. I think
I like that he's voiced by Bobby Cannavale. Like,
Yep.
it's great casting. He is the dog of Mayor Muldoon and the freaking test subject victim of Heather Muldoon.
I mean, straight up, right? Like there is a lot of weird, almost like not almost. It is straight up like animal abuse in scenes of this movie.
Yeah,
And like there's darkness in the first one too. Like I don't want to act like the second one like adds all this weird shit. Like that moment in the first movie where he threatens to take a blowtorch to Surly, I was like, whoa. Yeah.
What
But
about when in the first movie Andy says, I'll have a new squirrel coat for the winter. Like she's like, by all intents, like a hero character, and she threatened to murder and skin Surly and wear it as a trophy.
man, empowerment.
You know, kids film. Kids.
But yeah. So you're introduced to Frankie, the bulldog, who is of course going to be a foil and love interest to Precious, right? And beautifully so. I think that their story is actually super fun in the second one. That's the thing. I think that's the killer for me is I do want to start laying some praise on the second movie because there is some stuff that goes really well for it. First of all, the introduction of the mice, the introduction of Frankie, great stuff. It's a huge step up in the animation. I think like there's a world of difference in the textures, in the style, in the attention to detail in the animation in the second one than you get in the first one. You know, part of that is probably because they had a lot more people paying attention to that kind of stuff because the first one did so well. But like, it cannot be ignored, right? It shouldn't be ignored that there's a lot of real love and attention put into the second one, like there was in the first. It's just the difference is, I gotta say, I think it's losing that dude. Peter Leonidas. I keep wanting to call him Leonidas. What's his name? Peter
Leopritis. Leopritis.
Leoponiotis.
Yo, there's an N. There's an N. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. But I like that guy is clearly a driving force beyond the first one. He clearly has a lot of love for that story. It's something that he created and something that he was with for a decade of his life, if not more. Like that is what is missing from the second movie. There's no heart behind it. There's all of this hard work put into it because it's a phenomenal looking movie. There's some really good stuff in it. Some of the action sequences are actually like very fun, like action sequences, as ridiculous as they are. Man, the park falling apart at the end is something else. Like it is a set piece in a kid's animated movie. It is a hell of a set piece.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. And the fact that it all, again, it just like in the first one, it all kind of just amounts to nothing by the end.
Yeah, I mean, like people just rebuild the park somehow. Mm-hmm. There was fire and things were destroyed, but I don't know. It's just this. He learns the same lesson, like kind of, that. Yeah, like yeah. Surly, basically, like you need to rely on other people. It's like you learned that lesson last time. With your whole, the world isn't yours to take, it's not yours for the taking, it's yours for the sharing, is like a cool message.
Yeah.
But like, he just learns that lesson again. And also him and Andy are just like a couple in the end.
Yeah. I mean, the leap forward in the end, it's got to be months later because we see like puppies and stuff, right? Like we see that things have time has progressed in a very long way. So like there cannot necessarily. Here's where it gets weird for me at the end. It feels like they're progressing far enough forward to basically tell you happily ever after, and that's that. Except then you get the after credit scenes once again, in which once more we are reintroduced to Raccoon.
I'm so glad you saw that because I was like, holy shit, what?
Yeah.
I guess you just on this buoy still, somehow alive. You ate that cardinal. And he jumps off and he goes to swim to shore, and you see the two shark fins behind him. And like, are they working with him now? Is this going to be the third nut job? And that's a question that I asked, like, you know, hypothetically the first time before I did the research and saw that Nut Job 3 was planned for release in 2020, making this oddly relevant this episode.
Yeah, right. I don't want to say that like everything that's happening in the world caused it to not happen, though. I'm pretty sure it was probably the kibosh was put on it long before that. You know, I think I don't know, man. Here's the thing: you don't hear much about either of these movies, right? Like these are not the movies that people like talk about being like fun movies they watch with their kids. Still, these are not the ones that people like mention in drunken bar conversations of like goofy ass movies they like to watch when they're you know altered. You know, these just aren't. There's no cult following to these films, right?
Though IMDb TV will 100% try to convince you otherwise. Every time I go to IMDb, I get like, "Hey, do you want to watch The Nut Job?" And I'm like, "No, I don't. Why do you keep asking me if I want to watch The Nut Job with commercials?" No, IMDb TV, no.
Well, especially because let me take a second to bitch about IMDb TV, right?
Sorry.
They're owned by Amazon Prime, right? And so a lot of the ways that you access them is just straight through your Amazon stuff, right? Except that it doesn't work on a lot of older Amazon products, or should I say older products that have the Amazon app on it. I've got a couple of TVs in the house, for instance, that are like 2016, 2017 TVs that have the Amazon Prime app on it, and you can get to movies that are available through IMDb on them. But when you go to play them, they'll say, sorry, but this part of the app doesn't function, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, like, even though they're owned by Amazon and they are part of that whole, like, family of stuff, you still can't watch IMDb TV everywhere that you can watch Amazon, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. It's true that it's ridiculous, and I don't get it. It's also it's such a weird system. But
Why not just have it under the umbrella of Amazon and just say sponsored by IMDb, like with commercials? Like that is the deal. This is one of those movies that's sponsored by IMDb with commercials. The end.
yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know. Or like also give me the option to maybe pay like $4 more a month to be able to watch the IMDb TV stuff without commercials.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's all under your umbrella. So why aren't you packaging it? Like they're just it's such a weird, and I feel like that is the perfect place for the Nut Job and the Nut Job too. Is they exist in this weird realm, and they're going to get tossed around a lot because they're technically owned by Universal in the United States, right? Like that's the big. Yeah, and so maybe every now and then we'll see it on like TBS. Other than that, like where else are you going to see it? Like,
WGN America, I would imagine, just for that. Or Universal Kids Network, which I'm going to, just because we're griping right now, Universal Kids Network, they do like the bugs that the other networks do, where it's like two people back to back in the corner. It takes up more than 60% of the screen when they do that. So you'll be watching a show on that network and just like, what's it? American Ninja Junior will have a bug come up and 60% of the screen is obscured by
is so
a non-translucent, by like a solid image telling you to watch American Ninja Warrior Junior.
Oh my God. Yeah, yeah. Well, and so like you get the impression the kind of people behind this type of movie, right? To be entirely honest, I'm surprised you haven't seen like a Hulu show for it.
It was in development in 2015. There was a Nut Job TV show that was in development that eventually went nowhere when they decided, basically because of the success of the first movie. So the plan was we do this movie and then we're going to do a TV show. We'll start production in 2015. We'll start production on a TV show just because, we made back the budget. It's not really worth making another film, but we did make back the budget, at least in America. Let's do a TV show. There's interest in these characters. But then once they get the worldwide reporting and they look at everything and they saw how much more they made, they put the stop to that because for all accounts, there should have been a Nut Job TV show. They were working on it, and I think it lends itself to that better. Like the story of someone wanting to destroy the park. Like I would watch that episodically, weekly. Like I think that'd be great.
Right, especially if that's like an ongoing villain character. The mayor that wants to destroy the park is just one of the many villains that they have to deal with from week to week, right? Like I think is a much more interesting. Yeah, for sure. And like for a kids show, that would be totally fine. It's weird because it's a couple of movies that have so much thought behind them by like the individuals, but like you can just tell that like the studio system just wrecked these films. They don't care about these movies in the way that the artists behind them cared about them. And in a lot of ways, like the first one should have been a standalone, like kind of weird culty success. The fact that Nut Job 2 kind of actually, it's one of those rare times they'll admit that a sequel existing might actually kind of affect the first one in a lot of weird ways. Because if we were just talking about the first movie, here we are 10 years out or whatever, like more than that from the first movie, to be like, Oh, remember that, that one that this one dude, like he did like a short film that did really well. And like in the ways that people talk about Nine, that really weird Tim Burton produced, not directed, but Tim Burton produced animated movie because it was this kid's like student project that he just loved. So he produced it for the movie for the kid to make like a full length film. And it's like super fucking weird. And like, and going back and watching it now, it's all about like the end of the world and stuff. It's fucking creepy. Like that's the way we should talk about the Nut Job. Remember that time they made that really weird heist film about a bunch of squirrels stealing nuts from a nut shop? Like that's a fun bar story.
Yeah, it's one of those things where there was this time where you made the short film to make the longer film, and that's what Surly Squirrel was. Surly Squirrel was an animation test in 2005 that got this movie made. And I don't know, people always talk that the Surly was the villain in that original one and then becomes the hero in the second one. I disagree with that in a lot of ways, but that's just watch Surly Squirrel. It's on YouTube. It's 10 minutes. Yeah. It's pretty good considering it's like
there's a reason it gets the green light, right, for the whole movie.
There's a reason why.
But it's one of those things where that's one of the big critiques with the first movie is that he is seen as such an unlikable protagonist that it makes it a hard movie to watch. And I don't know, maybe it's different 10 years out because I don't feel that at all. Like he's a villain of his own success, right? Like he definitely stands in his own way, but he is not the worst protagonist antagonist that we've seen in even in kids movies. Like we've seen plenty of people that are shittier that we still hold up as like fun to watch characters now.
And that
maybe
actually
in a Despicable Me.
Yeah, that explains a lot about why the mayor is so evil in the second movie. If the critique was Surly is unlikable as your hero, you need to give it a worse villain.
Yeah,
and somebody who is doing the stuff that mayor is doing all across the board is a more despicable character.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, I feel like the first movie doesn't do enough to make Raccoon the villain that he really is. And again, it's that movie's inability to just make a fucking choice, I think, is really what kind of doesn't sell that first movie for me as like an excellent animated film. Because once again, you have an example of if they had just chosen to either make him just pure evil and playing everybody, that'd be fine. Or if they really wanted to lean into, he really thought he was doing the right thing, right? And a really good example of that is Smallfoot. When you learn that the I guess you would call him mayor, the leader of that
the
society.
Stonekeeper.
Yeah, that he has been. Well, that's. But
he's sort of a religious leader in a lot of ways,
right? But he strongly believes that what he is doing is important to keep everybody safe, and it makes him such an interesting character in that film, right? Like he's a really enjoyable antagonist in that movie, and like. They don't do that with Raccoon in the first one. And then in the second one, they lean so hard into making him the mayor an antagonist that it becomes kind of uncomfortable to watch in weird moments.
Yeah, I also wondered if maybe he was inspired by someone who was in office in 2017 in some way. I don't know.
I mean, like
the self-centered attitude and
like, without anybody outright saying it, I don't want to put words in animators' mouths. I don't want to put words in film writers' mouths. But like, you have to imagine, right? You just have to imagine that has to be that somebody was thinking that as they were working on that character.
I mean, not even it's one of those things where, especially 3 years later, it's hard not to see a parallel between that character. Even if it wasn't what they were intending with it, you see the parallels between his I'm the only thing that matters style of governing.
Well, and I'm going to sell off this public land for private gain is like one of the most obvious like swings at a Trumpian villain that you can possibly create, right? Yeah, man, I don't know. It's the same way that I feel about the writer of Back to the Future talking about how he always intended Biff to be Trump-esque. And like, yeah, that's pretty obvious in the second one when I think they literally like do up Trump Tower to be Biff Tower, right? Tannen Tower, whatever they call it. But like, you can't go back to the first one and tell me that you meant that in the first one, even though he tries to say that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely there in 1989 when Back to the Future Part 2 comes out. It like you just. But I don't know. Thinking of the character, I mean, with hindsight, I could see some of the things, like how
Yeah.
sexually aggressive Biff Tannen is.
Yeah, it's a weird thing that people like to like pull out at movie trivia and be like, Biff was always based on Trump, and you're just like, well, okay, like I don't want to argue this with you. It feels like it doesn't quite fit, and it's the same way that I feel about this dude in this movie. Is like I can't really argue with the idea that Trump is definitely part of the deal when they're doing this mayor of this town, but at the same time, it's not so apparent that I'm like yeah, like they were taking a fucking hard swing for a kids movie. Yeah, like that's not there. Don't go watching this movie just to see if they possibly do that.
Yeah, no, that's not the point of it. But yeah, he's despicable. I didn't like him at all.
No,
I was
at all.
very, very like turned off by that character.
Yeah.
Which
So I gotta ask, do you think the second movie, do you think it's a detriment to this film that it doesn't have Brendan Fraser in it, as I asked in the first two movies?
it is a detriment to the fact that he's not there, but only because he elevates that first movie. He elevates that first movie strictly by being Brendan Fraser, playing this character, playing the role that he plays in the first film.
Yeah.
And if you have him in the second film, maybe I don't know, he can become an antagonist or something. I don't know. Not having the character of Grace in there, period, is very strange.
Yeah.
And you know, my favorite
Is he
IMDb
written
trivia.
off? Wait, is he written off at all? Like he like we like in Mysterious Island we get the line about how he's off on an adventure somewhere. In George of the Jungle 2, they blatantly talk about getting a new actor because quote unquote the studio wouldn't pay for Brendan Fraser again, so like it's acknowledged. So like his character is always acknowledged in these other films. Is he acknowledged in this one at all?
First, Brendan Fraser's character is not acknowledged in Journey 2. You're thinking of how we acknowledged him, how we would have acknowledged him, how we armchair fixed the script. Because they don't do that in Journey to the Mysterious Island.
Well, there you go.
Much to its detriment. And as I was about to say, my favorite bit of IMDb trivia on the Nut Job 2, Nutty by Nature, is the character of Grayson does not appear without any explanation. It's like straight up, he never existed.
Yeah.
And
well,
and maybe he never existed.
yeah,
Maybe
he never
it's a Fight Club thing with Surly, and Grayson is who he wants people to see him as.
No, I stand by the theory that this is a world in which Grayson never existed, which means the first movie never happened, because without another squirrel to hold him up, Raccoon never gained the power that he needed in order to take over the park.
And I would be all about that. I would be all about it, especially because then Andy being like, we shouldn't be in this nut shop. We're only in that nut shop because, you know, it closed down, and Surly's like, let's see if there's food in there. And then suddenly Nutlantis.
So there you go. Fixing this one too.
But it can't be true. It can't be true because Raccoon is in the end credits scene.
We see a raccoon who's swimming away, but we
On
don't
the
see Cardinal.
same buoy.
We don't see.
On the same buoy. Maybe, I don't know, maybe follow the mental gymnastics I'm about to make is a doozy that I'm about to present to you. That is Raccoon from Universe A, where the original nut job took place. Right. And he is now swimming back in Universe A, and upon getting to shore, he will find the technology to cross over into Universe 1, wherein the nut job 2 took place. And he will wreak havoc on an unsuspecting park population.
I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot. You see, you've changed the past, so now our future is going to be completely different. It just won't be the future that you experienced.
And Raccoon was always based on Trump, regardless of Mayor Muldoon and his existence. I need the shiny. All right, so questions that I have from my notes that I would love for you to weigh in on.
Yep.
One, is Men in Black International just a slant remake of The Nut Job?
Man, questions I wasn't prepared for. I feel like, woof. No.
Really? Because you have Liam Neeson as a person in power who is beloved by his constituency. You have an idiot playboy, pretty boy who is viewed as a hero, even though you see nothing to support that in Chris Hemsworth's H and Brendan Fraser's Grayson, and you have a person who is basically a pariah who is out for their own goals, who will come in and topple the regime in order to make everything better for the people involved.
I here's what I will say to that. I think, and this may be a slam on MIB. It is
MIBI.
MIBI, but it is, which is weird because then it makes you think that it's MIB1 if you go off of anyway.
Yes, right.
But there's a lot of really simple tropes in Nut Job, and I mentioned that at the beginning. My opinion on that has not changed. It is not a complicated story, which is unfortunate because it is a heist film, and I think that the best heist films are the ones that complicate the genre, right? Like that's when it's a good heist film, is when something happens that you don't expect, but it still works. Inside Man is a prime example of that sort of stuff, right? But anyway, like that, it uses a lot of really simple storytelling to tell its story, and I think that is, take that as criticism if you want. I don't mean it as like criticism. I mean that as just like that is the structure of that film. It is a first time out event for a lot of those creators, and so there's a lot of precautions in what they do in that. But you can take that as criticism against MIB International, is I think it just uses a lot of the same tropey bullshit.
Yeah, MIB International, because they are also trying to like stay a straight course, a steady course, make sure that they can reinvent that franchise now that Will Smith is not there. Now that Will Smith is no longer there, they take a lot of the safe, easy tropes for that movie. Yeah. But it was very strange when I'm like, oh, this is Men in Black International. This nut heist movie is Men in Black International. And I don't know how I feel about that. Which brings me to question 2, which is how I'm going to answer the question of why Brendan Fraser is not in Nut Job 2 Nutty by Nature. Is that because it's just kind of a remake of Furry Vengeance?
Oh my god, yes! That was gonna say the only other movie I could think of the whole time was fucking Furry Vengeance, in which all the animals attack him. Yes, I think he had enough of evil animals. It was like, no, I'm putting my foot down. I'm not doing this one.
I'm not doing it. Yeah, because that's all I could think. I've never even seen Furry Vengeance.
And the most evil animal in that one is a raccoon. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, I know. I get it. It's just, I feel like that's part of the reason why he's even in Nut Job. Because Furry Vengeance is 2009, and they're like, oh, 5 years later, it'd be perfect. He was just in that other animal movie that is tepidly received. Let's reinvent it for Brendan Fraser. Yeah. Plus, Psy will be there doing Gangnam Style. And the only reason that he's not an animal is so that Grayson can be Animal Psy.
Yeah.
Think about it. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about.
Man.
So those are the thoughts that I had on that. Anything further that you would like to add to our discussion of the Nut Job?
Yeah, I mean, like we also usually end these things with an idea, like, would you recommend watching them to anybody? And like, give the first one a watch. Like it is a more than serviceable animated feature. The fact that it has a heist element to it is pretty good. I'm not kidding when I say like the weird subplot, like the B plot of the human heist going on is actually kind of interesting in a way. Like it is a watchable film. I can't say the same about the second. Like, take it or leave it.
Yeah, I would also recommend the first Nut Job movie. In fact, I've been recommending the first Nut Job movie since I saw it back in 2014. It is a film that surprised the hell out of me, and primarily because, I grew up with Pixar. right? I mean, it was only from when I was 9 years old did I have Pixar movies as part of my life. But
Right.
the thing about Pixar films, as much as it's like your toys have feelings, insects have feelings, and all that, they focus almost intrinsically on the object that is the focal point of the story. And what I really like about The Nut Job is that the human element is so like well realized and fleshed out. Like they're real characters unto themselves. And I can't remember the last time that I've seen an animated film with talking funny animals that like put that work in to fully realize the world.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, even like we joked earlier about things like Over the Hedge, and there's like two human characters in that whole movie. It's the woman that owns the house, and then Patrick Warburton as the exterminator, and that's it. Like there are other humans like that you see in passing, but there's not much more to them, you know?
Yes, it's very much the story of the animals. And that's true. I'm sorry, I'm distracted because I have to look up Over the Hedge. I don't think it's Patrick Warburton. I think it's Paul Giamatti.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I might be thinking of Patrick Warburton in B movie then.
Yes, which he's definitely in that one, because he's best friends with Jerry Seinfeld. Everybody knows that. Da 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 da. Y'all don't know what it's like.
Yeah.
That was my favorite part of when we saw that film in the theater was when that weird re-singing of that song came out, and it's definitely not Patrick Warburton in Over the Hedge. I don't know what's his name. What's that bad guy's name?
Why are you doing this to me now?
Because you brought it up, and now I'm curious. Who plays the
yeah.
exterminator?
So, Steve Carell?
Steve Carell is the squirrel. Shatner is the possum. Wanda Sykes is the skunk. Is Nick Nolte the...
No, it's Thomas Hayden Church.
Okay, yeah. But it's not...
Dwayne, as the exterminator. It's Thomas Hayden Church.
Well, that's good. That connects it all into the Fraser verse.
Nick Nolte's the bear.
Oh, yeah. Jeez. That's a good movie, Over the Hedge.
Yeah.
Perhaps spoilers for a movie that we're going to watch sometime. We're going to watch it sometime. I love that movie. And it's intrinsically linked to the friendship of Devin and Sejan.
Yeah. Also, I've been on a huge Eugene Levy, Catherine O'Hara like couple kick lately because I've been watching Schitt's Creek in the house. So we also watched A Mighty Wind the other night. Oh God, I love that movie.
That's a great film.
The two of them as Mitch and Mitch and Molly. Is that her name?
Mandy.
Mandy. Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't seen that movie in a long time. But yeah, so watch Over the Hedge too. Watch The Nut Job and then watch Over the Hedge because it'll just be preparing. And we have one more day to celebrate Brendan Fraser History Month. And that's going to be during our next episode. Sejan, I'm going to let you share with the people what we're watching as our final Fraser-less feature.
Well, when talking about this month, we realized we had an opportunity to do something on top of making it a celebration of Brendan Fraser. We could actually bookend this month in a very beautiful way. We opened up with Mysterious Island, in which he is replaced by one Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and then we quickly realized that it wasn't the first time he'd been replaced by him. And so we decided that for the final film, we are going to watch The Scorpion King, the like weird spin-off sequel to the Mummy series. Technically a spin-off of Mummy 2, if I'm not
Mummy
mistaken.
Returns. It is
Mummy Returns.
Where Dwayne Johnson plays the Scorpion King.
He played the Scorpion King. Well, he played the actor behind the CGI in Mummy Returns, but in this one he actually gets some real on-screen time. So yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to check out the Scorpion King.
And I'm going to watch Mummy Returns so that we can give you a little bit of base there too. So if you want to follow along with us, your homework, should you choose to do it, is to watch The Mummy Returns and The Scorpion King. Just The Scorpion King. If we're going down the rest of that rabbit hole to I think Scorpion King 5, where all the Scorpion Kings get together to steal a vault from Brazil, right? I think that's what happens in Scorpion King 5.
I'm pretty sure every Scorpion King was played by a WWE star at some point, right?
Yeah, Randy Orton, I know, is definitely one of them.
How was it not John Cena at some point? I got to know.
I don't think because I think it stopped before John Cena would have played that role.
Yeah. But yeah, we're gonna check out the Scorpion King next week.
I'm very excited because I've never seen it. I saw The Mummy Returns. That was the first Mummy movie I saw. So this is fun for me. I'm excited. But until then, if you'd like to talk to us about The Nut Job or any other, like, let's call it B-level animated features, you can find us on Twitter at The Say Report. And if you want to talk about anything but B-movie, you can get me specifically at Devin D. Decker.
And if all you want to talk about is B-movie, you can get me at Seed versus the World.
You're welcome, buddy. That was just for you. So until next time, coming to you live from Funkatron, Will, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Stephen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so it's delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.